A Thunder Bay man faces several charges related to child pornography following an investigation by the city's police cybercrime unit. Officers executed a search warrant on May 10th at a Halton Street residence, and numerous electronic devices were seized. 35-year-old William Joseph Daniel Hubbard is charged with possession, distribution, and accessing child pornography. He appeared in bail court today and remains in custody until his next court date. Thunder Bay's newly released infrastructure priority list was discussed at City Council, with those around the table recognizing the difficult work ahead. There was acceptance that the $325 million worth of projects would realistically not all move forward, with many relying on funding from the provincial or federal governments. Vasilos Bellos was at City Hall last night and has a story.
Monday's City Council meeting was certainly a wake-up call for many in Thunder Bay, after Council discussed its new top 25 infrastructure priority list.
The competition is intense, lists are long, and it will be very difficult for you to do as much as you want to do.
Estimates have every project on the list collectively costing $325 million. There was a clear consensus that not all these projects could be completed in their timelines, with many relying on funding from higher levels of government. McKellar Ward Councillor Brian Hamilton says Council can no longer think of projects in an isolated sense, and that supporting one may hinder others.
We need to learn how to say no. It's the most critical thing that we need to do as a council. If we want to do any number of these things, we have to say no to some of them. If we want to do any of them right, we have to say no to even more of them.
The infrastructure priority list does not include routine roadwork, fully funded projects, or projects led by outside organizations. This means the proposed police headquarters is not on the list, with Councillor Mark Bentz saying this will make future decisions even more difficult.
It's a $60 million estimate years ago. So we can probably guess it's up near 100 million now. So, we've got a lot on our plate.
A review of the 2022 municipal election was also discussed, with councillors questioning the low turnout amongst young voters. City Clerk Krista Power, who also served as the election's returning officer, says the city is always working with school boards to get the students more interested in local politics.
Understanding how easy it is for someone to send an email to members of City Council, attend a ward meeting, have a conversation with an elected official, and be able to share their views so they can actively engage in their community.
Only about 25% of people under the age of 40 cast a ballot in Thunder Bay's 2022 municipal election. Vasilos Bellos, TBT News.
Shunya Council held an open meeting yesterday evening with the hot topic of discussion being a proposed wellness retreat near Amethyst Beach. Over 50 Shunya residents came out to the meeting, many of whom expressed concerns with the proposed addition to their neighborhood. Jess Clement has the details.
Tammy Hutchinson applied for the zoning bylaw amendment late last year, seeking a number of planning approvals to enable the development of a retreat center on Amethyst Avenue. In addition to that, she wants to sever 2 new lots at the east end of the property to develop single detached dwellings. Hutchinson declined to speak to the media until after a decision has been made, but expressed to council that they've addressed all concerns by neighbors and met all the required recommendations, including approval from the LRCA and the MTO.
We have followed the process outlined by Shunya to the letter and then some. We have hired a very experienced planner to ensure good planning. We have provided an environmental impact study. We have provided a traffic study done by the MTO for the road that demonstrates traffic for our proposed business, and the creation of the 2 lots is minimal.
The concerns of those in attendance at the open meeting include how harmful the site could be to the environment, increased traffic and safety concerns, and how it would set a precedent for future non-residential uses. Walter Cooch brought a number of visual aids for his presentation, including a map which identifies all Shunya residents he claims oppose the development. He emphasizes that they have nothing against the Hutchinsons as individuals, but they're concerned about the long-term impacts.
You've got community members that are 3-4 generations, and they've witnessed the development and the changes, and that community has done a lot in terms of reserving and preserving the natural heritage around it. The other issue is one of allowing a commercial enterprise. Once you start commercial, it's very difficult to stop it. And then the other issue is one of precedence. So you make smaller lots. Everybody else that owns one across the way is thinking, well, I can develop that too.
There was no set date for council to vote on the application yet. Shunia Mayor Wendy Landry says in order for the decision-making process to be fair, they need to give time for people to take in all the information that has been presented and submit their comments.
We want to make sure that there's an opportunity for people to still speak to the application. And so the process really is, how long does it take people to get their comments in? And, you know, once it seems that it's subsided and there's no more comments coming in, then the clerk will prepare the package and bring it back to council on an agenda with the additional comments that are being made and the additional submissions. And then council will start to have a discussion.
Landry adds that the decision has to be based on a planning perspective. She says they'll need to take everything brought forward and have discussions with their planner and administration to make the best decision. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
It's another significant step towards the construction of the Waasigan transmission line. Hydro One has announced their intention to file the initial draft of the project's environmental assessment report tomorrow. Key figures are expected to be outlined in the comprehensive assignment, which is meant to shed light on long-awaited questions into potential impacts the project could have on the environment. The release of the report will be followed by a feedback period lasting until July 7th, in which the public is invited to offer up their concerns, comments, and suggestions. The final draft of the EA will be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks with an expected approval date by the first quarter of 2024.
The next steps here in this process, once we've released the draft environmental assessment, we'd like the public to review the documentation, to review the summaries. They can provide us feedback in a number of different forms. We would look to file the actual final EA in the coming weeks after that, weeks to months after that.
Following the submission of the assessment's final draft, Hydro One is expected to submit a leave to construct to the Ontario Energy Board by the end of this summer. In the labour market, there's a new report on women in the workforce. It comes from the province's Financial Accountability Office, which is releasing the first report of its kind. Siobhan Morris has the details.
Over the last 45 years,
women have made significant progress regarding labour market participation and wages, but still face challenges, particularly around the motherhood penalty.
Women forced to take time off to take care of their children or be limited to working part-time. While the gender pay gap narrowed steadily for decades, the FAO says it hasn't budged in 10 years. In Ontario in 2022, for every dollar a man earned, a woman earned 87 cents. Women's earning power takes a big hit when they become moms.
The FAO finds that after having a child, Ontario mothers' earnings are cut in half, and it can take up to 4 years to return to their pre-childbirth earnings level.
The rollout of $10 a day childcare could be a big help, boosting the number of women in their 30s and 40s at work.
From 84% in 2022 to between 85.6% and 87.7% by 2027.
But there are some potential roadblocks,
including a lack of childcare spaces, shortages of childcare workers, or inadequate government funding.
Also this morning, the Auditor General is sharing a snapshot of the environment, something she thinks the government should be doing every few years. Bonnie Lysyk finds our air quality and the water in our Great Lakes have improved in many ways over the last few decades. But Ontario is warmer because of increased global greenhouse gas emissions, and we're seeing more weather-related disasters. She warns our landfills can only handle another 10 to 13 years of waste. At Queen's Park, Siobhan Morris, CTV News.
A partnership between Thunder Bay Police and the Canadian Mental Health Association is proving to be a major success. The program, called Impact, began in 2021. A CMHA crisis response worker attends mental health calls alongside a uniformed city police officer. And now, a recent Lakehead University study found the program contributed to positive outcomes for those types of calls received by police. The impact team's efforts were outlined in a news conference today, where key findings from the LU study were shared with the media. Out of the nearly 2,800 mental health calls made to city police since 2021, 64% were diverted by the impact team away from traditional institutions and towards services delivered within the community.
The research demonstrates that over the last almost 2 years now that the impact team has been an appropriate response to individuals in crisis like that. Only high level acuity folks need to really be in the emergency department for the right level of care. But those who don't need that acute level of care can be cared for in the community.
They get to introduce a calmer approach, just being not in uniform, albeit they have a vest that shows crisis worker. It makes them more approachable to somebody that is in crisis, because there's always a stigma with what a police officer can do with the authorities that they have.
Officials from both agencies say the findings in the study should help ensure the impact program continues for years to come. The Oliver Papoonge Heritage Park on Highway 61 will open for the season this long weekend, but the mayor of the municipality says her council will have some tough decisions to make about some of the buildings on the site, which have fallen into disrepair. Jonathan Wilson reports.
The tourist attraction, formerly known as the Pioneer Village Founders Museum, will open for the season on Saturday under its new name, the Oliver Papoonge Heritage Park.
The reason that the name was changed was just in consideration of some of the wordage that was used in the past, and we wanted to work towards our reconciliation, and we just felt that this would be the best to change those words.
Oliver Papoonge Mayor Lucy Kloosterhuis says although they're excited to welcome visitors for another year, not all of the buildings will be available to the public due to structural issues.
There are some buildings that may not or will not be open, but they were not open last year either. What we're looking at is we're getting an RFP out for some engineering studies to be done on these buildings. We have had our building inspector look at these buildings, and there's some structural items that are very severe, and so we have to look at these before we can open the buildings.
Kloosterhuis says, unfortunately, the price tag to carry out all the required upgrades is more than her municipality can afford.
We're looking at a little over $900,000 over 10 years if we open all of these buildings to the public. Now our conversation is, what is the final cost going to be for each building? Which buildings are going to remain here with the museum, and which buildings are in such a depleted case that we're going to have to close them and remove them?
The repairs to the general store and the village square add up to over $400,000, while the Pioneer home totals over $300,000, and Kloosterhuis believes they will have to be demolished. However, most of the other attractions are safe for the public to enter, including Russ's Garage, which had its grand opening last year, the old Conmee Schoolhouse, the classic church, the CP train station, and the Slate River Hall, which contains the Duke Hunt Museum. Kloosterhuis says she's committed to keeping the Heritage Park open for years to come.
And I think it's very important that the young persons of today come here and see, what the past was like. We do have some schools already registered to come this summer, and we're hoping that we can get more in this year and in the future. And as I had mentioned before, the present museum board is very dedicated to seeing this open and seeing a lot of people come here.
Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
Well, turning to weather now, Mitch, yesterday we saw kind of that hazy, smoky sky, especially when it's starting to get dark out, and I kind of see it around the sun as it was setting. But today it doesn't seem as bad and seems fairly nice out there.
Today it was a lot nicer than yesterday. The smoke coming from British Columbia with those forest fires making their way over to Thunder Bay. That cleared out last night, leaving today pretty nice conditions. Low of 7. That was midday. The high was actually earlier in the morning, heading from last night with temperatures up to 17. It did get to around 14 later in the day, so fairly nice with partly cloudy skies. Most of the sun came out later in the afternoon. A lot of clouds earlier, but fairly nice. The wind from the northwest gusting from 10 to 25 kilometers. Now we head to the region. Temperatures also fairly warm out west in Kenora at 18, Fort Frances at 19. They saw plenty of sunshine, but there is a storm system making its way from the west heading into the province. It's going to take a little bit before it gets to Ontario to affect places like Kenora, heading up farther northwest to Red Lake at 14, but they are on the way. I'll have more on that in just a second. But first, clouds in the area currently. Also, Sioux Lookout 14 at the moment. As we head farther northeast, a little bit cooler, 12 in Armstrong today. They also saw plenty of sunshine. Greenstone, a little chilly, down to 6. That is below average for this time of the year, but planning to heat up tomorrow, while Sault Ste. Marie a little warmer at 13. Clear skies, that's going to last into the night. Now, as for Thunder Bay, tonight's going to get a little bit cooler, down closer to that 0 mark with only a high of 2. It is going to be mostly clear throughout the night, and the wind is going to be jumping from the west 6 to 22 kilometers an hour. Now, as for rain, there is some later in the week, and it is going to be making some impacts in the region heading into tomorrow. Of those details in just a little bit.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Well, today, the Justice Minister announced new legislation to strengthen bail conditions. We'll have all those details for you as your Tuesday News Hour continues.
Proposed reforms signal that repeat violent offenders who pose a risk to community safety should not be released while awaiting trial.